Hi everyone, this is Abu from IASC and you are listening to IASC Fitness Podcast, the show that talks about health and fitness, strength and conditioning, and sports science for the people who loves sport. Today we are talking about MMA strength and conditioning training with Gavin Pratt, Director of Strength and Conditioning in UFC Las Vegas. Gavin, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Abu. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, can you introduce yourself more to our audience?
Sure. So currently my role is the Director of Strength and Conditioning at the UFC Performance Institute. Prior to that, I was the Manager of Strength and Conditioning at the China UFC Performance Institute, where we had to set up the entire Performance Institute from the ground up. And then I also worked for EXOS and the Shanghai Sports Institute in Shanghai for the National Games. And prior to that, I'd spent most of my career in strength and conditioning in Australia.
Great. So you are from Australia?
I am.
Great. I didn't know that. I didn't know. Yes, that's interesting. And I was looking in your experience the other day. It was very interesting. You moved to state, work with EXOS, and then went to the Shanghai team, and then Team China for a period, and then period of the time, and then you moved to the UFC in Shanghai Center and now in Las Vegas. Congratulations. That's really interesting.
Thank you very much, Abu. And I think one of the coolest things that we have as an option in this industry is that we're able to use our jobs to travel and see the world and immerse ourselves in different cultures. And for me, that's a large part of what I do. It's not just a job, it's the ability to see different people, different cultures, and different workplaces. And I think we're really fortunate for that to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to talk about the UFC. I mean, because I had a wrestling background, and when I was in primary and middle school, I tried wrestling. You know, I'm from Iran, so we are quite good at wrestling, and so I'm following with Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, wrestling, judo, and all combat sport. And I realized UFC the past 10 years suddenly come up and just past all those MMA organization, and now they are good. What do you think about this? Why UFC is that much successful?
Well, UFC is the original MMA tournament. They started 28 years ago now, and originally the first tournaments were to see what martial art was the best martial art. So they would have a very underground scene. There was one tournament, and they would try and get sumo wrestlers versus karate, or Muay Thai versus Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and then it kind of morphed into what it is today. So I think being the first is always a good start. Secondly, it attracts the best martial artists on the whole. Obviously, there's still some exceptionally good martial artists that are competing in different leagues now because they're getting paid better, or they're getting more endorsements, the ability to endorse themselves. But ultimately, the UFC is considered the peak or the pinnacle of mixed martial arts for fighters in MMA. So if you attract the best talent, most people want to watch it.
Exactly.
I also feel like it puts on the best show as well.
Yeah, I love to watch the UFC. I mean, always, and following, and the atmosphere. I think I always appreciate Dan White, what he's doing. I mean, with UFC, and make this big brand and everyone in the world enjoying watching.
Sorry, could you repeat that, mate? It just cut out.
So I say always I like to look at the Dan White. You know, Dan White. With UFC, what he's done with the UFC and make it that big.
Yes, yeah, Dana White, and there's a couple of brothers that bought the business, and then it almost went out of business, and they put on the very first TV show called The Ultimate Fighter. And on The Ultimate Fighter, there's a famous story they put up where Forrest Griffin, who's in the Hall of Fame and currently works for the Performance Institute, fought Stefan Bonner. And supposedly some people were tuning in to watch it on live television. And then as the fight progressed, the TV ratings just started climbing rapidly. until at
Yeah,
the end they had a
exactly.
huge audience, and that kind of turned the UFC around and made it what it is today, and really created such a solid fan base.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that UFC culture, what they do. I mean, there is a lot of organization. Even me, I don't watch. I mean, but when I look at the UFC, I mean, that's something different. I mean, I see everyone is watching in any age. I mean, male, female, they love to
Yeah,
watch.
and it just
It's
won the
really,
biggest league or most popular league in America. So it beat NFL, NBA, and NFL. So that's a fairly big achievement considering, I guess it would be considered a violent sport for a lot of the
yeah,
population, and for it to win one of the most popular
yeah.
leagues in America was pretty significant.
Yeah, that's great. Let's go back to our most important, I mean, our today's topic, strength and conditioning. You know, the, there are a lot of coaches, personal training, performance coach, they want to enter to this combat sport or work with, I mean, UFC athletes, but they don't have that much information. So I will go through some important question that I think is a question for most of the performance coaches in combat sport. And the first one I think is we want to talk about the uh, fitness test in UFC athletes. So the athletes come to you. Do you have any combine for like UFC combine, or when the athletes come, which kind of tests you go through to get familiar with the level of their fitness?
Great question. So we just, for a bit of background, very quickly, the UFC Performance Institute in Las Vegas is very different to the one in Shanghai, China. So the one in Vegas
Yeah,
works with professional UFC fighters, and the one in Shanghai
yeah,
works with professional UFC fighters and also has an academy program, which is a full-time in-house developmental program. So for the developmental program, which is known as the academy, we do a combine
yeah,
because we want to recruit athletes. So we have a
yeah,
battery of tests, which is a little bit different to what we do in Vegas because they're already established
yeah.
fighters. There is a
Oh,
crossover, and so what I'll speak about, I guess, are the four main what we consider or term tier one tests. So the tier one tests
T1 test.
are basically when we reverse engineered the sport, we decided that these four tests were probably the most important strength and power diagnostics that we could use to just see a baseline of where our MMA
Yeah,
athlete was at. So the first one is we'll do a loaded counter movement jump, look at a load velocity profile. Where are their deficits? Are they
yeah,
deficit at the force end or the velocity end, or are they fairly well balanced? That's for the lower body. The second test that we do is the landmine punch throw, and we'll do a very similar thing. It's a load velocity profile, and we'll be looking at their upper body. And just
yeah,
recently, it's been found that in our academy athletes, it actually was able to determine differences between our tier A athletes, which are the best ones, very close to the
yeah,
UFC, and our tier B and C athletes who are more developmental. So the landmine punch throw plays a role in the upper body power
yeah,
development. Then we look at an isometric mid-thigh pull to see what their maximal isometric strength is. Obviously, this is different to
yeah.
your isotonic strength, which might be your traditional lifts like squats, trap bar, deadlift, bench press, chin-ups, those things. So we want to know what the isometric strength levels are like because it's very
Yeah.
relatable to grappling.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Then finally, our fourth tier one test, we actually do neck strength tests on Val's fourth frame. And this is really cool. This is very, I guess the way we're approaching it is quite new in the world of S&C and combat sports. And so that's a really exciting area.
Exactly.
And we're able to utilize that information then to program accordingly, which I think is part of your other question, which was if a strength and conditioning coach wants to train an MMA athlete, what tests should they do and why?
Yeah, exactly.
Try and get to those four tests, and then you'll be able to compare with the UFC roster very soon and see where your athlete is, and then you'll know what you should be doing from a programming perspective.
That's great. And I was watching one of the some of your videos about the neck training. I mean, it was new for me. I was interesting, and I mean, I do a neck warm up and do, but and we did some neck training when I was young. I was doing wrestling, but this was very special and interesting. You do the movement, different movement with the, I mean, that I don't know what's the machine you're
The iron neck.
using, iron neck,
Yeah.
and you keep it stable and you do the different movement, lunching, squat, I don't know,
Yeah.
different movement. I was shocked. I said, wow, this is a nice equipment and nice
Yeah.
exercise.
Well, and what the force frame, we test the neck in the four vectors, right? So we do flexion, extension,
Yeah,
and lateral flexion. We then look at the ratios between those and we can tell where the weaknesses are. So if, let's say, for example, we test and the flexors, the neck flexors are the weakest part of that profile, well, then we now know what exact neck exercise to give you. We're not just doing extension
yeah,
like you
exactly.
might have done, or, rolling on the head
Yeah,
for a
yeah.
warm up. We're actually going really specific. But then on top of that, we can look at the type of exercise we prescribe. We might build from an isometric into an isotonic, into an oscillation drift, as we term it. It's kind of like a slow on off kind of mechanism.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then we go into an
Interesting.
oscillation more of a ballistic nature. So that's closer to the fight, where if you're going to engage in a contest of throwing strikes, we found that with concussion, there's two main components to decreasing the risk of concussion. One is you want a strong neck, but two,
Yeah,
you've got to be able to brace, and therefore you need that reactivity to be able to see something coming and brace for it. And they're the two main components. So we
that's
try and start training those components or elements into our strength and conditioning session.
yeah, interesting, interesting. So one question, I mean, so a lot of athletes come into your training center. You said you have different level of the athletes. Are you designing the training for them? I mean, you're not just you, your team designing training for them, or I see because some of the UFC athletes they have their own personal trainer. So how is the relation?
Yep. So the
How to work? You work with them.
the in China, the academy program is definitely us. So they're part of our facility. We prescribe for them 100%. UFC
Yeah,
athletes, it's up to them. So basically, the UFC Performance Institute, the services we provide from sports science, nutrition, strength and conditioning, physiotherapy is all free for any rostered
yeah.
UFC fighter. So
Oh,
yeah,
interesting. I
and
didn't know
and
that.
that's to provide that health aspect to them, like where we are trying to look after their longevity of careers. But if you don't live in Las Vegas and you live across the other side of America, or if you're an Australian UFC fighter, then it's very hard to make the most of those services full time because you don't live there. So it's basically up to the UFC fighter if they want to take on our services. We do remote programming from S&C and nutrition, but a lot of the time,
Yeah,
like you say, they might have their own strength and conditioning coach, and that's completely fine. They might just engage with nutrition. That's also okay. So they have the
yeah.
choice as to
I
what they
like it.
like to pick and what suits them as well.
Yeah, when you say this kind of thing, I remember the EXOS system. I mean, just it's very interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, I like it. I didn't know this. The UFC is supporting that much their athletes, and they provide the different, like you say, nutrition, rehabilitation,
Yes.
and performance training. That's very good
Yeah,
for. That's why UFC is UFC. Is different from others.
that's right.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. So we go back to for. We have a lot of injury in combat sport and UFC almost every fight. So we have a fight related and like not fight related injury. How you deal with this? How was the strategy first for reduce? I think we cannot prevent. I mean, but for reduce injury, and how's your approach to this? I mean, before to reduce or after they get injury?
So we found that most of the injuries come through training. So
Training.
yeah, and obviously a lot of the injuries that happen or occur during a fight are contact based. So a lot of it's soft
Yeah.
tissue, contusions or concussions, those sorts of things. So I guess it depends on the injury. For example, if we're looking at training being the largest mechanism of injury, then the top five are seen to be neck, shoulder, knee, lumbar spine, and ankle. So we can then look at that data and say, what are our tests around those areas for strength or mobility? Let's test them if that athlete has had a prior case of an injury, and let's see if we can integrate some remedial based exercises into the program, because ultimately strength is going to be a large key to them decreasing the risk of getting injured, right? So we can focus a little bit on that for the individual athlete. But if we do get an injury from concussion, let's say, well, the process is that they need to come through our return to play concussion protocols, and we have a full systemized attack on that, and that involves both the physiotherapy / medical side, but also the integrating with the strength and conditioning team as well. So they might come back, do a C3 logics test, which they had a baseline originally for. We've just integrated a test called the Buffalo concussion test, which then gives us information about how to then prescribe heart rates and readiness to train. And then we have a program in the S&C which is very much fitted to their phases of return to play for concussion, which might include things like synaptic, which is hand-eye coordination. It might include like a quiet stand on the force plates to see their inversion, eversion, their sway, I guess. And so we can sort of connect all these dots and make sure that the athlete is ready to go back to training.
Yeah, that's great. That's interesting. So when you see in, I mean, like combat sport, UFC, they almost train everything. I mean, fitness, not just so fitness is fitness. But they need to practice Muay Thai, judo, wrestling, boxing. I mean, jiu-jitsu. I mean, they need to. So those sport technique, and they need to practice fighting, and then of course their fitness, and then they have also psychological, I think, training. So how you manage that load? How is the you manage, and what's the fitness in that system?
I think this is definitely a work in progress within mixed martial arts, and there's so many facets that I want to talk about with this particular topic, because in Shanghai we're able to get a better grasp on it. Our head coach has got a background in strength and conditioning. We all sit down and we work together like you would in a soccer team or a football team. We work together to plan out the loading, not only on a daily basis, but across the week and across the months. And we look at the loads that are affecting it, and then we'll get SRSS scores from our athletes via their phone every single morning. We also have Aura rings, which we can monitor. And then we also prescribe particular recovery sessions based on what their session just was and what their session might be that afternoon or that next day. So in Shanghai, it's much easier because we're in control of everything and we work together on that. The problem here is that there's so many different great mixed martial arts clubs that have different routines. So the two main clubs here in Vegas, they spar on different days. So there's no one cookie cutter approach because everyone's a little bit different. So we need to learn what they do in-house. And the main thing of strength and conditioning coaches is we are the second wheel. We need to underpin what they are trying to do, not try and take over. It's more important they learn their martial arts skill than it is to get their strength and conditioning. We are important, don't get me wrong, but we can't be seen to go above and beyond and make them so tired that their sparring suffers. There's no point in that. So we try and utilize first beat here in Las Vegas because we can get the athletes to strap that onto their chest while they're training, even with some wrestling and grappling based scenarios. So we can monitor their training load every session they do. We also utilize Aura rings, and that'll give us a thumbs up, thumbs down when it connects with our AMS system. And then obviously you can just talk to the athlete. So for me personally, by Friday, they're pretty gassed. And I know that that's going to be the case because a lot of them will train between 3 to 4 times a day. So by Friday, they haven't got much to give. So that's where something like the auto-regulatory progressive resistance exercise method might come in, or utilizing gym aware or velocity based training to monitor it. Like if they're still good, let's get after it. If they're not, well, that's okay. We're just looking at the velocity, and that's all that matters. Doesn't matter what the weight on the bar is. So that's where technology can sort of help us without even knowing what they've done.
Yeah, yes, exactly. These years, the technology, sports science help us a lot. If you want to give a draft, an idea, so can you go us through how is the training, how many times per week you do a strength and conditioning training, whatever is strength, power, I don't know, speed, quickness, all the things that would give an idea to the coach if they want to design a training for their MMA athlete, what is the start, how they can do it.
Sure. Obviously, many ways to look at it, but I'll just give some ideas, I guess. And a couple, I guess, rather than specific exercises, it's more let's work backwards. So that there's usually 3 points that we need to think of. First one is when you're getting an athlete towards the fight, there's 3 things you need to think about. First is they're going to need to make weight. Second is you don't want to injure them. And then finally, third, you can start thinking about performance outcomes. So it's kind of that order in MMA. Secondly, when you're looking at their weekly structure, when is sparring? That's the most important session. Sparring is the number one important training session. It's the closest to the sport. So let's say, for example, let's use an example of Tuesday and Thursday being the 2 sparring days that the athlete has. I'm going to now start on my Monday. So if I'm doing a Monday afternoon session, usually they'll train 2 or 3 times a week, depending on the person. But let's go with, we've got 3 sessions. It's off camp. We've got 3 sessions with them. If I'm going to do a Monday training session, I have to think about that sparring session on the Tuesday. So if you think about what's going to fatigue that athlete the most or potentially cause the greatest soreness that may affect their sparring, then generally strength training is going to be that biggest killer of their sparring session. So that's why you probably pick power or speed session on that Monday. Now, if they've sparred Tuesday morning and they want to, and that's a hard session, and they want to do a strength and conditioning session in the afternoon, then you can probably go hard and match that as well. So that might be where you do your strength and your glycolytic conditioning, because that's a whole high day.
Yeah.
We're not just redlining across, right? So very traditional type periodization strategies, but I guess it's understanding what the important factors are in MMA, which is sparring. Or you could think of it like, when is the athlete doing their grappling or wrestling training? Well, maybe that's the day that we do strength as well, because it's quite a similar sort of output. When are they doing their striking? Maybe we mirror that up with their speed and power day. So that's another way to look at it. Or alactic conditioning is on the speed and power days, glycolytics on your strength days, or aerobic is on those days as well. And then you get into the off-camp versus fight camp. So usually you'll see a fight camp will be anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks in length, unless it's a late notice fight.
Yeah.
And so I got this from the head coach in Shanghai, Dean Amerzinger, when he looked at periodization of the fight camp. You think fight week is going to be the easy week from a strength and conditioning, not from a weight cut perspective. Yeah. From a strength and conditioning, that's easy. And then T-2 would be moderate. T-3, that would be your last high week. Then you just keep working back in a mod high low kind of scenario. So those are some things as well, like where does your conditioning stop? For us in Shanghai, we knew what they were doing in their technical training, so we would stop in probably 5 weeks out. We would stop any sort of real conditioning, maybe just alactic top-ups, but we wouldn't do any aerobic or glycolytic work. But then in the off-camp, we would then try and prioritize particular things for that athlete. So we'd give them a profile and say, hey, your VO2 is fantastic. We probably just need to keep you doing what you're doing, but your glycolytic energy system, not so good. So we have to focus on that for you, or someone else might be different.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's very good. So you have a 3 level, this 3-5 level, and every level you go, or every phase you go harder and harder until they get in the competition. Usually in UFC, how many fight they have per years?
Uh, I would say
Usually.
the average would be 3, but some people have had, I think the most is 5 in a year, and then some people don't fight for like 18 months, you know, depending on injury and things like that. So I'd say the average is 3 to 4, but it just depends really. If they get the matchup, if they're injury free, the timing works out. A lot of factors.
Yeah, that's not a
It's
lot.
not a lot,
I mean, it's in the
but
yeah,
it's a
that's
brutal
not.
sport, so it's probably enough, you know.
Yeah. Of
Yeah,
course, in that level, they cannot fight more. I mean,
no.
from the business point or from the training point. So, in your approach, can you, because you have I mean, now also UFCs, you have a lot of females athletes that they are getting, I mean, strong and strong, and I mean, everyone now enjoying watching their fight, and they're really, I loved it, is training. Any different when we are training with the female and males athletes? There is anything we need to consider where training with females, or the system is the same?
We did find in Shanghai that the training load of the technical training, and probably a combination of technical and non-technical training, that they all trained as an academy, and we found that the females tended to maybe not handle that volume as well.
Yeah.
They tended to get injured a lot more. I'm not sure why. No one really knows why at the moment. That's one of the small things we did notice. And then in America, so far, I think the main thing that we're looking into is just the effect of the menstrual cycle, and seeing how that affects their training outcomes, because in such a high energy requirement sport, there's going to be weeks where that's a factor. So I don't know where that at the moment is a to be determined project. So some
Yeah.
fantastic ladies that are working at the PI now are really investigating that, but at this stage, we're not sure. We don't know yet. Mm.
That's because interesting. One thing's because the UFC also is a weight category. They have a different weight category, yeah, and so and they need to some of the athletes, they need to cut weight. Are you involved in that? So you write a plan for them to cut the weight, and
Not
this
me
is a part
personally.
of your responsibility.
No,
I mean your team.
yes, yes. So we have a designated dietetics team that take athletes through that process, because it is an extremely dangerous process. As an example,
Yeah,
there's, you know, the target is for the athlete to be within 8 to 10% of their weight class in the final week. So they need to lose between 8 and 10% of their body weight in that last week to make weight.
yeah,
And that's usually through gut content, fiber, and then obviously water. So that has to be done cleverly and timed correctly,
yeah.
so that you
Exactly.
can still, you could probably do that not safely, but you wouldn't be able to perform then. So it's about how much of that performance benefit that you've just worked so hard to get, can you hang on to after going through something so severe? And that's where our dietetics team comes into play and tries to do it in the most scientific and safe way possible. There's still some people that will have issues, and you know, just today, an athlete who's not in the UFC but is close to it was telling me he had his fight. It went really well, but he had to lose 16 pounds in 16 hours. I mean, that's phenomenal numbers. And that was to make
Yeah,
weight. And then he has to go into one of the hardest sports that's on this planet Earth right now. You know, like it's
oh my
crazy.
God.
So
Yeah, that's
it has to be done correctly. And the more often you do it based on science, the longer your career is going to be as well.
yeah, yeah. Because exactly. Because I remember when I was wrestling, that like 3 4 days before the uh, competition, we start losing weight, and we did a lot of running. I remember once, uh, uh, you know, we had exactly the day before the competition, and it's just we don't know how to lose weight. So I went to the truck and I ran 25 laps and like 10K,
Yeah.
And so I was okay after that. And then the day in the competition, the first three wrestling, I was good. It was very easy for me. But in the final, I couldn't do anything. I mean, I just stand and I just give up. I couldn't move.
Yeah.
I was out of the energy. And I realized still, because I still contact with some of my athletes, some of my friends, or they are in the combat sport or wrestling, judo, in a weight category sports, and still they have a problem. They have a problem. Sometimes they ask me, but me, I don't have that much experience in this area. I mean, we read the books,
It's different
but
though, isn't it?
reading is not.
Yep.
It's a practical. You go doing and you need to implement it. So,
Yeah.
I
As soon
think
as
that
you,
was
as soon as you spend time with these dietitians and speak with them, you realize how little you know. They're
exactly.
so good at what they do, and I guess it's like any professional at this level is that they've accrued this knowledge. So you could read a book, but they actually know more than the book because they've gone through the experiences, and you just can't compete with that.
Exactly.
And to be honest, I don't want to. That is that's all them. Like I'll take on preparing an athlete in strength and conditioning every single day, and I feel comfortable to do that. But to do what they do is just so out of my league now that I've been around them. That's no, not for me.
Yeah. This is exactly just. The, do you talk about these things that we talk about the science and practical training? I mean, can you explain? Some people they say, I mean, coaching is just a science. Some people said coaching is the art. So how do you see this? Which one? Sport is the art or is a
I
science?
it's definitely both because
Yeah,
the science is the theory, but the art is having the ability to transfer that knowledge to someone who hasn't had the opportunity to study it like you have. So I could
yeah,
tell you
exactly,
exactly what I learned in my masters, but if you're an athlete that's had no background in that, you have no idea what I'm talking about. In fact, we could talk about
exactly.
velocity and power and strength or force, and I'll guarantee you that there's almost 85 to 95% of athletes won't be able to tell you what the difference of those terms are. Yet we tell them this is about power, this is about
Yeah, yeah,
force or velocity. So what's velocity? What do you mean? I mean, I know that's kind of like trying to be quick, right? But they couldn't tell
yeah,
you the difference of that. They don't know what power's calculation is. So why would you put it in those terms? Like, that's the art. How do you
yeah,
maximize the
exactly.
output of the athlete so that they understand what you want in their terms and they get better and educated and they go, light bulb moment. I know what the coach is trying to tell me. That's the art.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Mm.
I mean, you are coaching for I think over like 20 years, and you you have been I mean, you're coaching many sports. I mean, I mean, what I think a lot. I realized like the period you were working with Shanghai team, you achieved amazing. I think like 33 medals, like I don't know, 20 gold medals,
Yeah.
something like this. I mean, the number was it's very
There's a lot of teams.
interesting. I
Yes.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of things. I mean, and your background, I mean, from science, from Australia, state, China, different sport, and now MMA. Uh, I'd like you talk about to talk to young coaches. So how they can be a great coach? How's the approach? How they go through how they start and how they can get the level like you. How long does it take and how to go through that? I think this is. I would like to talk more about this. I think
Yeah.
this is a very important question for all the coaches.
I guess it comes down to an example that happened literally today. So we have interns at the UFC, and one of the interns today asked me. He looked at the clock and he said, "How do you guys know that the session should go for exactly an hour? Like, how do you nail that? Like, every coach was able to program for a 1 hour program for these athletes, and he just couldn't get it. He just didn't understand how we were able to do that."
So the whole session is 1 hour. I mean,
Yeah,
all the things, or just
just 1 hour for
interesting.
most of the time. Like it
Yeah,
depends on the
yeah,
phase, but generally we'll give them an hour because they already train so much. We want to try and limit that to a very effective 60-minute period.
yeah,
But he was astounded that we were able to do that so accurately, consistently. And I just said it was because you practice. Like you just have to get the experience. And I feel like that's the answer
yeah,
for your question is you just I feel like young coaches go, that's the sport I want to work in and that's all I'm going to do. It doesn't work like
yeah,
that most of the time, unfortunately. You have to do the hard yards in that you have to do sports or work in sports or work in locations
yeah,
that maybe is not your number one pick. But what
yeah,
is it that you're getting out of that moment? You might not know at the time, but later on you'll realize, okay, all those lessons I got throughout that period has turned me into the coach that I am today. And so when I first started, I was working in Australian sport, but on the side, I was
yeah,
also working with general populations as well, just with my own business. And that was fantastic because I was able to
yeah,
develop my skill of motivating a person who'd been at work from 8 till 5. I didn't really enjoy their training that much, but I needed to find ways to keep them motivated and interested and
yeah,
effective in their approach. So that's where, test and retesting came in. That's where working out,
yeah,
finding out about the person, going a little deeper than just sets and reps. All those skills were developed by working with general populations. And then if you've got that skill set, you can then transfer that to
yeah,
athletes because athletes are exactly the same. They're just really good at a sport. They're still people, right?
yeah,
Like, so
yeah,
if you want to get the best out of your athlete, understand them as a person and and start working out ways that you can, I guess, get the most out of that person, right? Yes, they're an
yeah,
athlete,
exactly,
but they're still
exactly.
a human being. So get the most out of that human. How do you do that? You talk to them, you
Yeah,
find out about them, you find out what makes them tick, you find out if they're in a bad mood and you ask them about it. Let's go there, let's chat about it.
yeah,
It has to be more than just sets and reps. And I feel like that when you're at university, there's this thing where, oh, that's not by the book. That's not what
yeah,
chapter 16 said about cluster sets. You're like, well,
yeah,
this person's a person, and today they just did 3 other sessions, and you're the fourth. So let's be a little bit kind to them, and we'll still get what we can out of this session because that's life. And the book's not writing about life. The book's
exactly,
trying to educate you about
exactly,
best case scenario so that you understand it. But maybe you can't apply it
exactly.
that way today, and that's okay. Yeah,
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a good suggestion. Yeah, you're right. I mean, we need as a coach, we need to study, we need to get that uh, uh,
of
education and
course.
also practical, and then step by step. I mean, we learn a lot of things that is not they are not in the books, but it's the line experience and life experience, training experience, and also our work with the athletes, and we're familiar. Okay, these athletes, if they are different. I mean, different region, different religion, different uh, gender, and this give us idea. Okay, like what you say before, you talk with the athletes, and just in a minute you give the idea, and you say how you know that.
Yes.
But they say, oh, it's not a guess. It's like over 20 years of experience. I get to this, and then I can, in a second, give you answer.
Hmm.
I think that's very interesting. In these many years, you have been working with many coaches. You learned from a lot of coaches. First, have you had a mentor,
Uh,
or do you have a mentor or had?
kind of. Yeah, kind of. I three people who I look up to greatly in the industry are Dan
Yeah,
Baker, Jeremy Shepherd, and Duncan French. And I'm very fortunate now where I'm working alongside Duncan French every day, so that's fantastic. Jeremy Shepherd is a good friend of mine who was at Surfing Australia and is now at Canada Snowboard. Fortunately enough, my wife, who is a dietitian, works with him at Canada Snowboard, so I get to stay in touch with him a bit. And so he is someone that has grafted a lot of my thought processes as well. And then Dan Baker, I have
interesting.
a fair bit to do with him, I guess, through the Australian Strength and Conditioning Association, just at conferences, but
Yeah.
then also I love reading his work because he's a very practical coach. Like he's exactly what we were just talking about before. He has an amazing ability to
Yeah.
connect with people, especially athletes that he's working with, and he's extremely clever as well. He does his PhDs are all about work that he did in the field, like they're practical PhDs. It's
Yeah,
like this
I
is
love it. Yeah, I love those kind of,
this
yeah, yeah,
makes sense. I can use this information.
yeah, exactly.
This is great.
Yeah, yeah,
And so I've always had a real affiliation to that kind of work in the literature, in research. It's like I can use these pieces of information and it's real world settings, not lab settings, even though we need them as well. But that's the literature that I sort of drift towards, I guess, when I read things.
yeah. That's yeah. I mean, those coaches. I'm more familiar with Dan Becker because I love to. Remember, I watched his video on YouTube. It was giving me a lot of information,
He's
especially
great.
about the strength training. And but one I realized this past like 4 or 5 years. I mean, before I never. I know Dan Becker. I mean, it was, but I realized this past 5 6 years, the Australian performance coach, strength and conditioning coach, is getting more and more. And anywhere you go, you talk with 2 3 coaches, one of them from Australia. And I think what's happening in Australia that we have such a amazing and great strength and conditioning coach. What's the system they develop such a great coaches?
That's a great question. I mean, I couldn't put my finger on it, but I do feel that the talent and the knowledge in Australia is fantastic. It's really, really high level. And maybe that just breeds more of it. You know, the Australian Strength and Conditioning Association is doing fantastic things
Yeah.
throughout Australia and really driving that from the front foot. And I just feel like people are jumping on that and wanting to be a part of it because they're really promoting it to practical level coaches. Their courses, like if you want to be a level 2 Australian strength and conditioning coach, you need to do a course and then you need to actually complete a booklet which is about your planning and your programming, which is then marked by a current day high level S&C coach. So you're needing to prove that you can actually write out plans and programs and ideas and philosophies on paper, whereas other sort of corporations are multiple choice questions. You just tick the
Yeah,
box.
yeah, you're right.
You're not having to
Yeah,
explain
exactly.
where you're coming from. And to me, that's what coaching is. It's like, yeah, I could just rote learn this stuff. ASCA is not doing that. They're like, pick a sport, pick an athlete, give me your annual program, give me your macro cycles, give me your training blocks, your phases. Why would you put up volume there? Answer me it in this many words, and then we'll mark you on it and question you on it. And then at the end of all of that, you have to write a lit review or a research paper that would be published in our journal article. And it stops people from going further than that if they're not really genuinely interested. Like, yeah, you got to work at that. That takes a lot of work. So
Yeah, it takes.
if you're not interested, you won't do it. And so it kind of pulls the weeds away and says, right, who's actually wanting to go here? And now if you're a level 2 ASCA coach, you know that you're of some pretty good quality.
Yeah, exactly. I go through their coaching, and I mean, it's what like you said is I mean the assessment is crazy. I mean, you have to do a lot of things, like you see, and the good thing is that the first day you go and they ask you to. I mean, they give you a mentor, so you choose a. I mean, I don't know, they choose or you choose. They have great coach with many years experience, and you work with them, and then you send all the information to them, and you can get a good feedback, and beside you get a good sports science knowledge. And what do you say? You go everything. You do homework. It's not like what do you say? You just quiz. There is 100 question. You go. Because now we here in International Association of Strength and Conditioning, now we are analyzing other association or organization who provide the course, and we realize, that is the problem. And inside most of the association, I mean, it's just a book. You study the book, and even you don't need to. I mean, some of the coach they get some performance or strength and conditioning license, they never done a push-up or squat or never run in their life.
I hate
so
that.
they are good at sports science, but not practical, zero, nothing. But the thing I like, for Australian system is, they go through everything. I mean, they're just not one. They science, practical, everything. They are together. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was all my question, Gavin. There is any question you would like, you wish I ask you, you want to talk about, or anything you're interested to share with us?
Put me on the spot. I guess that's what you were just saying at the end there. I think it's so important for particularly strength and conditioning coaches wanting to get into the industry or who are already in the industry and want to establish themselves. You cannot forget that you are your own guinea pig. You're able to practice the ideas that you want to perform with your athlete. You have to do it first.
Yeah.
And the reason I've always said this is that, let's say you're, one of the examples I use is we do a backward sled drag at the UFC. It's great strongman training and minimizes soreness, blah, blah, blah. But because I do that in my own training as well, by a certain point on that track, the legs really start to kick in and it's not very comfortable. And I know that because I do that every week. And so I will be able to say to the athlete, when you turn around and get back to the 10-yard line, that's probably when your legs are going to start hurting, but you've got to push through. As long as you don't stop, that's okay. Slow's okay. Stopping is not. Just keep pushing through. They get to the 10-yard line. They're like, how'd you know that? And that creates that buy-in because they're like, okay, well, this guy obviously does the things that he's telling me to do. So I trust him because he obviously has felt the same things that I've felt. If you haven't done it, there's so many things I've seen in coaches who don't train that they miss. They miss little coaching cues. They miss little movements that might damage or create injury because you've done it and you've gone, ooh, that was close. I won't do that again. So I think it's absolutely essential that training is a large part of what you do, but it shouldn't at the same time overtake your job and create more interest, especially if you're working with general pops. I know a lot of coaches that have got into personal training, for example, because they like training, but then their attitude to their clients is horrendous. It's like, oh, can't wait to finish this session so I can go and train, chest and guns. It's like, come on, mate. Be professional. It's just, it's amazing how lazy people can be in different facets, and that's just not something that I think S&C coaches should be.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that is when you say coach, I mean, if we are sports, we look at them, you need to, they have some, fitness level. I mean, you cannot, you enter the gym or just go with sweat in the gym and just with the tie and just order the athletes.
They won't listen to you.
To do. I think that
they won't listen to you.
They don't. Yeah, I mean, but when they see, after the training finished, their coaches still are going to do some running, doing some weight training or any other kind of exercise, swimming, cycling, and they say, oh, this is active. I mean, they will, I think they listen more to you. I remember I was coaching one of the Chinese fencing team. So we had a running, and there was more fun in run for enjoy, and I joined them and I ran with them, and they was shocked, and they say, Abu, you're
good.
You don't have a muscle. How you can run that fast? I said, oh my God, man, guys. When I was young, I ran like 200 kilometers per week, like 150K per week. I mean, and then the science, the day after that, they view change. Mm-hmm. They see, oh.
It's respect.
And before this, they thought I know just the box science. I just talk. When they realize, oh, I can do things. And then their mindset just change, and then after they respect me, they ask me question.
Yep.
And I think that's the main thing you mentioned about. I mean, it's not science. You need to also go gym, do yourself, and then I mean, it's like I see some coaches, they talk about the squat, how to do the squat, how to do the bench press, but sometimes you need to go and show them. I mean, sometimes the athletes, they don't get it.
Yeah.
You just go, it's okay. You do like this.
And
And
why would you listen to a driving instructor that can't drive?
exactly.
It doesn't make any sense. It's the same thing here. Like you just said, if you can't do a bench press and demonstrate a bench press, how are you giving any kind of safety and trust to the athlete you're teaching this to? You don't know how to do it.
Exactly.
So you don't know what could go
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah.
You don't know what weight they should be using. You don't know the technique that well. You've just read about it. Like obviously most people have done a bench press, but you know what I mean. It's you have to be able to demonstrate if you're going to put it in your program. Don't put it in your program if you can't do it yourself to some kind of degree. You know, you might not be the best Olympic lifter, but you should be able to do a snatch and a clean and a split jerk or something like that. So
you're right.
Yeah, to some level.
Yeah, that's why we always, we have a lot of students. I mean, especially most of them, they are university student. And I ask them, guys, study. Yeah, you need to study every day. But now in the school, you have a weightlifting class, you have a CrossFit class. I mean, go as a student. Don't work as a coach. Just as an athlete, find the coach and, train with them. I remember I was in Beijing Sport University. I mean, the last semester, I just find one of the Chinese Olympic. I mean, she was Olympic champion. She had many top athletes in the world. It was good opportunity. I will just go and say, please teach me. And he told me, Abu, but you are a strange coach. I mean, you need to teach my athletes. I say, no, I mean, you are qualified. You are doing this for many years. I mean, I'm nothing. I'm zero compared to you guys.
Yeah.
And I realized wasn't I? I mean, one the thing that she taught me, changed my all the training teaching approach or training system according to the weightlifting.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Gavin. It was really pleasure for me. Anything you want to say?
I'm all good, mate. It was
appreciate
a pleasure
your
speaking
time.
to you. Yeah, absolutely.
It was pleasure to you. Thanks for your time. Hope in future we have more time in future when you have more time, and then hopefully you can give us time in future and we do it again. It was amazing today. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Abu. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, see you guys. See you next time. Bye-bye.